Hello and welcome to Powwow Nation Live. I'm Paul Gatter from PowWows.com. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's been a couple of weeks since I've been here, so welcome. I'm so glad to be back. I'll catch you up on a few things. I've got some announcements, and I have a really special interview with two guests tonight. I'm super excited about that. All right, let's get to some announcements, and then we can catch up on some of the things going on. Let's go straight into powwows that are happening this weekend. All right. Let's see. This is going to be in Washington, 109th Annual Spokane Tribe. All right. So if you're over in the Northwest, go check that out. That's a good one to see. 77th Annual Northern Arapaho Powwow is also happening over in Wyoming. All right. So that's a couple of things over there on the west side. That's going to be August 28th through the 31st. This is Labor Day weekend, so some of these powwows I know are going to be going on over into the weekend or over into Monday. Here's one, the Shinnecock Powwow. This is one that's on my bucket list. I got to make it up there at some point. So that's up there in Southampton, $70,000 in prize money this weekend. And then we're going over to Alberta for the Heart Lake First Nations 22nd Annual Competition Powwow. Check that out. All these are available over on our calendar, PowWows.com/calendar. You can find out more over on there. The Dakota Classic Powwow, we will be streaming this one live. Michael and Dolores are heading up there to stream this for PowWows.com. So go check that out. If you're not able to make it in person, here is your chance to see it live as well. So that'll be great. Then over in Nevada, there's going to be a powwow and hand games. That's pretty awesome. This is going on this weekend as well. April 29th to the 31st. Some good prize money happening over there in Nevada. Over in Utah, the White Mesa Bear Dance and Contest Powwow. This one is going all the way through Monday, so check that out if you're over in the west side. All right, we're coming back over to the east side. Kentucky, 16th Annual Honoring Our Veterans Powwow up in Corbin, Kentucky. And this will be Saturday, Sunday. All right. And let's see what else we got. Over in California, Santa Rosa Days Powwow and Gathering. That'll be happening August 30th and 31st. And then the 64th Annual Tecumseh Lodge Powwow over in Indiana. Been a while since I've been up to that one, but that's a good one. If I remember, the vendors up there are pretty on point, pretty awesome. So go check that out if you're in that area. And then last for this weekend, but certainly not all the powwows on our calendar, so many more. Fall Harvest Celebration up in Ohio is, that's up there in that Midwest. So we got a couple going on over there, several in the West Coast. Oh, lots happening. Don't miss any of that. All right, so we've got a couple of comments here. Vibe 1, looking forward to the next powwow live stream. Awesome. Yeah, so if you weren't here this weekend, man, we had a great one up in Skamitston. The weekend before that, we were over in Crow Fair. Pretty awesome. Make sure you don't miss it out on any of those. Pete asked if there's anything in Erie, Pennsylvania. So not this weekend, but here's one thing you can do. Pete, let me jump back over. Oops. Let me switch back over to that. So all you have to do is just go to the URL PowWows.com/your state name. Oh, I never spell Pennsylvania right. Okay, so the other thing you can do is just say powwows in Pennsylvania, and Google will take care of it for you and take you right to our page, and here's a list of all the powwows that are going on. I've got some of the more popular ones at the top, and then if you keep scrolling, you'll see even more detailed information. So there you go, Pete. There are some in your area. All right, and then got the thumbs up there. Thank you so much. All right, catch up on a few things. Yeah, live stream this weekend. Our giveaway for the month of August just wrapped up. We will be starting a new one, and I'm excited to announce that. I'll be announcing that in a couple of days. It'll start beginning of September, so look for that, PowWows.com/win. is where you can always find out about that. I just got back from Cleveland. Any Cleveland people here? It was pretty exciting. I was up there for a conference. Got to speak at the Content Entrepreneurial Expo, and as well as attended some really great sessions. We also went to a Cleveland Browns game. I hadn't been to I've been to an exhibition NFL game that they had here at South Carolina at our stadium, college football stadium. First time I've been in an NFL stadium for a game. That was pretty cool. The Cleveland Browns looked pretty good in that preseason game against the Rams. It did come down to a final field goal, but that first team from the Browns in the first half, they looked sharp. They were very much in control of the game. Second half, they put Shador in. The crowd really wanted to get behind him. I saw lots of Shador jerseys. He did not have a good outing, though. He was sacked 5 times. That was hard to watch. So don't know what's going to happen with him, but the Browns, they can make some noise this year. Let me know in the comments who you're cheering for, or if you're like me, maybe you're just a college football fan. My Gamecocks kick off soon, and high hopes for the Gamecocks this year. We've got Heisman Trophy candidate as quarterback, and it's been a long time since there's been this much expectation on the team. A little nervous. We're not usually favored in the beginning to do something. I kind of like being the underdog. That was fun last season, but here we are. We're in a little bit different position. All right. So that's to catch you up. That's our powwows coming up. So here you can find PowWows.com/powwows near me. It'll get you more information about all the things on our calendar. If you're new to powwows and you want to know more about them, we have a free email series, PowWows.com/powwow1, powwow 101. They're open to the public. Anybody can attend. So if you're wanting to experience Native culture in person, that's the place to go to get all that information. All right, so let me play you a trailer about the thing I am interviewing for tonight, and then we'll talk about it and get to the interview.
I'm really a good guy, you know. I'm sure people are still talking about a lot of things.
The story takes place at the edge of the world, northern Alaska. Teddy, Kyle Smith. To us natives, it didn't make any sense.
The suspect in a shooting of 2 brothers has been identified as a Kayanna actor who went missing earlier this month after the death of his mother.
Mother's dead. He shot 2 men. No one knows why. I had no idea how deep this story would go. I had no idea how far this would take me.
I didn't want to shoot him. I had to go along with what they wanted me to do.
Who's that?
Wild people out there.
The ukuns?
Yeah.
Ukuns. The mythical beings that we were all told about by elders. It just stopped me in my tracks. Gave me the shivers. I wanted to know what made him tick. Who do you think I should talk to?
Hi, my name is James.
I think he saw God was talking to him. His mom was on the floor. Teddy was smiling like a normal person.
No, he wouldn't do anything to hurt her.
Bullet come in on the back of my right shoulder.
Tell me what you saw. Point blank, what did you see? What really happened out there when he was on the run? Did he really see ukuns? What just made him snap? I had been trying to talk to Teddy for years. There's only one person who has the answers. Teddy, my name is James Dommek Jr. I want to know the truth.
Wow. So, thanks to Hulu, I was able to interview the author here, or the writer of the audiobook. It was first an audiobook and now turned into a documentary from Hulu. So I was able to interview the director and the author. You'll hear from both of them about the story and how it's just been haunting them, and just really it was something that they were compelled to tell the story. So I hope you'll enjoy the interview. And if you haven't subscribed to Disney Plus or Hulu, you're going to want to after this. It's pretty exciting. All All right, let's see. I got a couple comments before I start the interview. All right, thanks for being here, everybody. Okay, so here it is, my interview with the team that produced Blood and Myth, the Hulu documentary. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate you spending some time with me today. If you would, can we start with just you guys introducing yourselves?
Sure. I'm James Dommek Jr.
Hey, I'm Kahlil Hudson. I'm the director and one of the executive producers on Blood and Myth.
All right. Yeah, so I watched it today, and one quote that kind of stuck out to me is that this story, it was, I think the quote was, his story chose me. So I'd really like to hear, from you guys, how did you come upon the story, and how did it speak to you?
I've been obsessed with this story since I first heard it. At the time, I was working here in Anchorage, Alaska. I was working and doing freelance film production. And I'm originally from up north where this story takes place, up northwest Alaska.
Right.
And so when this all went down, I was getting information from the newspapers and the TV news. I was also getting inside information from film crews who had worked with Teddy. And I was also getting inside information from the Native community back home. And also the mechanic community through the Buckle brothers. I had inside information from all three different communities. And I was like, well, what do I do with all this? If I don't tell this story, I felt it was going to haunt me forever, because I had all these pieces to this insanely unbelievable story, very unique story of survival and violence and, culture. And so I thought I might as well take a chance at it. And so I did.
You used the word haunting. I think that's a good description of parts of the story. Now that you've done it as audiobook and now film, or documentary film, does it still haunt you?
I feel like I got it. I feel like I did it justice. I felt like it chose me. Like I say, it showed its neck to me, and I had to get it. And I had to, share it. So I don't feel that I'll live with that regret as an old man. It won't haunt me as an old man. I feel like I let it loose. We brought on Kahlil to direct the piece, and fellow Alaskan native, and it was really important to me to have an Alaskan native director on board as well.
Yeah, I've only been up there once, and really just touched the tip of Alaska. I didn't really get up into the northern part, but even my little bit experience up there, things are different up in Alaska. So, telling a story like this with not just the backdrop of Alaska, but life is different up there. How did y'all approach trying to portray that in film, and really show people what it's like being there?
Kahlil, you want to?
Yeah. So, I'll just kind of reiterate and agree with you. I'm born and raised. I was born and raised in Alaska. Spent most of my formative years there, and have since spent a lot of time in Alaska. And it's different in many ways. And I think one of the ways that's obvious, but then that trickles down to impact a lot of different other ways of life, is quite simply the environment, right? Which is obvious. It is not easy living up there. It's difficult to get around. Transportation is difficult. The communities are isolated. Getting food is difficult. A lot of the amenities that most people are used to living down here in the lower 48 are just not available. And so what that does is it creates a much stronger sense of community, and where um, individuals are reliant on one another um, and to survive, quite frankly. But it also kind of impacts even like, hey, if you need somebody to come over and move a couch, you've got 10 people in your phone that you can come over and help you move a couch. So
Right.
there's just this really sense of a strong sense of connection. Um, and you see that in this film in different ways, right? And we didn't want to kind of hit people over the head with any of this stuff, but sort of the interconnectedness of people, even over great distances, is I think one of the defining characteristics of people's relationships is that it's very, so you can rely on other people we just showed up to Big Bob's house, right? And he's he's immediately, oh, how can I help you? What do you need? And even to the crew, right? We were we were a small crew. We wanted to keep it small. And there's just this sense that of people wanting to help and people wanting to help you get at the information that you need. The flip side of this is that was not an easy community. These communities were not readily willing to just go on camera, right?
Right.
So there was, I think, one of the biggest challenges was that James certainly experienced when he was making his Audible original, his audiobook, is that people just did not want to talk, right? So that was a lot of work, and we spent many months going back and forth in conversation with Lorena, for example, who's Teddy's sister. She was very reluctant to talk to us, and it really took months of going back and having discussions, and she finally kind of agreed to open up. So there are certain things that like that certain things that we had to challenges that we had to overcome because of and that all kind of comes back to how tight the communities are, and within within that you have people who they also don't want to necessarily be the spokesperson for a whole group of people, whether
Right.
it's a village or a tribe. So
Yeah, and it's I was curious as to what the community's response would be. I mean, you're touching on not just personal stories but cultural stories. So yeah, I can understand people being reluctant. I mean, how did you guys walk that balance between telling the cultural side, but while not really, I guess, isolating or making the community up there not want to talk? I imagine that was tough, right?
Yeah, it was, we in Alaska, and it's cold and dark in the wintertime. There's no other way around it, right?
Right.
And we watch a lot of movies. We watch a lot of TV. We read a lot of books. There's ways we pass the time indoors, and movies and being one of them. We realize that a lot of our stories up north were never told by us. They were always told by other people, guessing what we're like and what we think. And so I think just in general, I think Inuit culture in general is pretty shy. And people were willing to give you the coat off their back, willing to help you get your truck unstuck. But once you pull out a camera and you start wanting to talk about a fugitive on the run and the village being on lockdown, then I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk.
Right.
But I grew up in that community. I was born and raised up there. I still have a lot of family up there. And so because they knew me, they knew my family, I was able to get in, I think, farther than other people would be able to. And I was able to convince them, like, this is going to be worth telling our stories. It's worth one of us telling our own stories, and not having other people tell it for us. So, that was a big convincing line. And because anytime Inuit people and Yupak people see ourselves on TV, it's usually it's a caricature. It's over the top. We're in furs, we're in spears. We have spears. It's the stereotype.
Yeah.
And so, getting them to get on board, it took some coaxing, but once we did, it was very, very, very fruitful.
I jokingly say sometimes that, anytime I see a native story being told, film, TV, and it doesn't include a powwow scene, I think it's pretty cool, right? I mean, because that's the default that it's easy to go to. Well, I'm curious. You first told this story with Audible. I mean, how did you approach that? That's such a different medium to tell a story. I mean, how was that you were approached by them, or did you feel like the story needed to be told in that format?
Well, when I first had this idea of this, just when I had all these facts from all these different communities, I thought this would make a great movie. But I thought this is it. I knew because I worked in film production, I knew that in order to make a movie, it takes an army of people, like a literal army of people.
Right.
But I knew that if I made a podcast or an audio book, that's 2 or 3 people. And so I thought if I want the movie, I have to do the audio book first. It was a proof of concept idea. If I show them the proof of concept, they'll get what I'm seeing for a movie version. And it just kind of worked out. I was working at a native radio station. There was a guy from New York City who's working in there for the summer. He makes podcasts. He makes audiobooks. And so he asked me one day if I knew any good stories. And I said, no, but I got one he said, do you have any good stories that make a good podcast? I said, no, but I got one that'd make a good movie. And I told him this whole story. It was like 4:30 on a Friday, like water cooler, like looking at the clock, waiting for it to turn 5. And I told him the whole story. And he was like, that'd make a pretty good podcast or a pretty good audiobook. And I thought, okay, well, let's do it. And so I wanted to tell this story in a true crime way, but unveil the facts like a movie would, kind of slowly, but also tap into the native storytelling aspect of oral tradition and native storytelling. Because humans have been listening to stories longer than we've been reading them or watching them. We've been listening to them longer. And so trying to get back to that and trying to, just use the theater of the mind. And, that was the idea of making the audiobook first. And it did surprisingly well. It was a New York Times bestseller for 6 weeks. #1, it was one of the biggest Audible originals of all time. So, I was just very surprised that it did that well. So
What's the response been from, the film is still yet to kind of see the reactions, but what has been the reaction from the local community of seeing this or hearing the story? And I'm curious too, is like the general public in seeing these kind of cultural things be told, as well with the crew trauma. What's the reaction from the audience has been?
I'll answer the first part and I'll let Kahlil answer the second part. The response from back home with the audiobook has been received very well. People where we're from, we're not used to hearing ourselves and seeing ourselves on the way we are on screen. It's usually a caricature or a stereotype. And so to hear native accents and to hear village English and, in a story like this, we're starting to feel more represented in a way. The premiere date got released through Deadline, and that got shared a bunch up through the social media up north. People up north are very excited to see this, to see one of our own stories told by one of us. So, but as far as the reception to the rest of the world, I'll let Kahlil talk about that.
Well, we don't know yet.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that's the easy answer. We will know September 4th what the reception is. But just to add to what James was saying, like, I was just in this tiny upiaq village last week, and I told somebody that I was working on, this documentary based on Midnight Son, and they were like, "Oh, Midnight Son?" Like, that guy James, you know him? And I was like, "Oh, yeah, we've been working on this documentary." And they're like, "Oh, that audiobook was so good." They're like, "There's going to be a documentary?" And that was the response to the audiobook that I had, which, as James said, it's a very cinematic audiobook in a lot of ways. And you listen to it, and I binge listened to it, and when it was finished, I was like, I want to see all of these people. I want to see James. I want to see these places, these villages. What's Guyana look like? What does James look like? What does Teddy? And and this is a movie about an actor, right? This is a
Right.
documentary about Teddy Kyle Smith, who was an actor, and you hear pieces of On the Ice, for example, excerpts. But I want to see that movie, right? I want to see his performance in that film, On the Ice. Which was also kind of a really important film um, in indigenous media period, right? And so yeah, I mean, I was like, please, let's make this, let's make this into a documentary.
James, I do want to ask you, I'm sure there's some people out there with stories, right, that are haunting them, and maybe they're feeling compelled. You or you weren't like you said, you kind of talked to somebody at the radio station there, um, and you worked through this and figured out how to do an Audible book, and now working um, together to do this documentary. What would you tell people that want to find ways to tell their stories? What's your advice for somebody out there with compelling stories or haunting stories, as you said earlier? What advice would you give them?
I would say right off the bat, write it down. Write down the bullet points. You don't have to write the whole thing, but just write out the bullet points. And if you can't find the bullet points, just write out what you name it, or write out what you name the chapters, or try to reduce the story down to a sentence. If you can get it into 2 sentences at the most, it's probably pretty good. And I've, through music and through other things, I've traveled to almost every major res west of the Mississippi through my, through the years playing music, and been all over Alaska. And I know that there are stories that exist on these reservations and in these villages that are unbelievably good. And I think what we have to do is be brave enough to write them down, and then try to try to talk to somebody who makes stories. Usually the people who I work with, they have a journalism background. They were already doing stuff for NPR. They were already doing stuff for the audio. So have a good story, have it written down, and have it concentrated, reduced down to in simplest form. And then talk to somebody who makes these. Find somebody who makes documentaries, find somebody who makes podcasts, find a journalist, find anybody who knows how to get it to the next level, and then pitch it to them. And if they think it's good enough, and if it's good enough, then you take it to the next level, pitching it to a place to get it made, like Audible or other places. But podcasts are a very inexpensive way to get your story out there. Podcast format,
Right.
audiobook format, very inexpensive way to get your ideas out there. It doesn't take an army. It takes 2 or 3 people, maybe 10 at the most, altogether with post and all that. So that would be my my advice. The other advice would just be tell your story, whatever you think is your best one. Keep telling it to your friends. Keep telling it to people on long drives. It's like, hey, I got this idea. I think it might make a good book. Think it make a good podcast. Might make a good movie. And just talk to your most creative friends and go on a long drive and pitch them this idea. And if your creative ADHD riddled mind friends can pay attention and want more, then you probably got something pretty good. So I mean, that's what I did. I'm not saying
Yeah.
so.
And as far as the technical side of learning how to make films, like, you can go to school for it. I teach at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and we have an indigenous film program.
Yes.
So it's the only program of its kind in the country. It's a tribal college, and it's a 4-year hands-on film program where students are making films every semester. So you can go out and learn how to do it.
And sometimes I think it's just the determination, especially, pushing yourself to do a podcast. I think, as long as you're determined and have a compelling story, I think you can learn the rest. So I appreciate that. I do want to ask, James, you've approached this story several times now. Is there anything that you found while telling the story twice that surprised you, or you learned more about? And is there any lingering questions? I know there's the true crime thing. A lot of people really get into the details of these stories, especially listening to podcasts and Audible books. So is there any lingering questions out there that you still have for this, and or anything that surprised you?
Yeah, I definitely had a few surprises. You're digging more and getting more into the weeds and getting more, picking through everything with a fine-tooth comb. So definitely found out new aspects of the story. Just going through all the evidence again, all the courtroom audio, all the transcripts, pick up things that you pick up things that will, because we're making a doc, it's all visual. The audiobook podcast is all just listening. And so you're looking at these things through totally different, just through different eyes. As soon as you add the camera in, it adds another access to now it's an X, Y, and Z thing. And so I definitely found out some new things about Teddy. I won't tell, it'll give it away for the doc for people but I definitely learned some new things about him. And I definitely have lingering questions about, so what he actually saw out there, new information that I found out through other people from the region who have similar sightings and experiences. There's just more out there involving these mythical beings. And as soon as I put out Midnight Son, people are in the region. They know, the people up north, they know that I like these kind of stories and that I'm very interested. So people have been sending me things, pictures, recordings, sightings, photographs of footprints in mud, very interesting stuff. And so, because they know I'm into these things, they send them to me. And so that just opens up a whole new can of worms, just like, okay, where was this? Who saw this? And so, I don't know. It's been an interesting ride for sure.
So I guess kind of wrapping up the story a little bit, when people, whether they listen to the audiobook or not, but now when they see this, what are you hoping they take away from this? What's kind of your final message that you want people to know, whether about Teddy or the region? What do you want them to take away from this?
I want people to know that Inupiaq people are still here. We are good storytellers, and that we still believe in some mystery left in this world. I think the Western way of thinking is that we know everything, and indigenous thought, especially up north, is maybe we don't know it all. Maybe there's still things out there we don't fully understand. Yeah, that, and just introducing people to my world, to up north, life above the Arctic Circle, Inupiaq way of life, and our stories. And I believe Native people have a lot to offer to humanity through our stories. And I think the right people, the decision makers out there, are finally starting to see that.
Awesome.
I'm excited to
Yeah.
I'm excited to introduce people to kind of a new monster in the woods. You know, that many people haven't yet heard of. You know, it's not a Inukin is not a household name. But I hope people take away from the film. I mean, the central message of the film really resonates with me, which goes back to kind of, you know, traditional storytelling and what it was there for. You know, Tlingit storytelling, you know, my tribe, or upiaq storytelling. These stories were meant to keep you alive. They were meant to, like, make sure that you didn't stray too far off the path, right? To kind of guide you through life. And if you did get too far off the path, you know, there were consequences. And that's both a literal sort of example that's in the film, but it's also kind of a much larger thematic idea that goes back to James's own personal journey with this, right? Of coming into his own as a storyteller, and really doing, honoring his great-grandfather's legacy as a storyteller, his great-grandfather being, the last great upiaq storyteller. So that's what I'm excited.
Be interesting now to see if this does take like you said, the monster in the woods, if we now see some other stories come out of this, some fictional stories, that would be interesting to see some things set up there in Alaska. Well, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much, and I hope everybody will go watch this and go back and listen to the Audible. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
I appreciate Hulu and the guys there giving some time. This is now streaming on Hulu. Blood and Myth. Go check it out. And if you are an Audible.com member, you can go and listen to it there on Audible. This is like he said, this is a haunting story that stayed with him for a long time. You're going to want to go watch this. It's very interesting, and I'm very curious to see if you watch it and how you feel afterwards. So please let me know. Thank you so much for being here tonight and joining us for the show and the interview. Thank you for your support. I appreciate everybody watching. Remember, we have a live stream starting tomorrow from Alberta. If you're looking for powwows and you want to find one near you, there's one happening in all 50 states and almost every province up there in Canada, and we've got them on our calendar, PowWows.com/calendar. Thanks so much, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Go spend some time with the family and get out to a powwow, or just get out. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next week.